get everybody, so everyone is here. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and open up the meeting, and this is our virtual town hall meeting for Prince William Sound businesses, and we asked people to come together and so we could provide an opportunity for people to learn about how to apply for Alaska CARES Act funding that's being allocated to small businesses through this funding that the state has received. My name is Kristin Carpenter. I'm with the Prince William Sound Economic Development District as of April 1st, so it's still pretty recent. And I'm new to the organization, and I'm new to a little bit to economic development, but not new to the region. I've lived in Cordova since 1994, and I managed a small nonprofit called the Copper River Watershed Project since '98, so have been around in the area for quite a while. The other folks that I've invited to the meeting, and I think Kathy might be the only one not here, but the the Chambers of Commerce from Whittier, Valdez, and Cordova in the region, because what I've known and it's been reinforced in this process is that the chambers seem to be the kind of the first line of contact, the first, I was going to say line of defense, but that's not quite what I meant to say, what I want to say, but the first interaction that a lot of businesses have. And so we're going to be working as partners with the chambers throughout this year and probably for the following year, especially on providing business relief and business assistance during as a result of the fallout from the pandemic. Our board members for the Prince William Sound Economic Development District are Helen Howarth, who's the Cordova City Manager, Jim Hunt, City Manager in Whittier, Mark Detter in Valdez, Patience Anderson Faulkner from Cordova, Dan Blair from Whittier, Mike Wells from the Valdez Fisheries Development Association, and Larry Evanoff from Chenega, and Ricky Komkoff in Tutitlic, and Nancy Robart also in Tutitlic. I've asked Jon Bittner to join us tonight from the Alaska Small Business Development Center. And then also we have Alan Weitzner from the Interim Executive Director from the Alaska
Industrial Development
Aidl.
Yeah, Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority.
Thank you. Yes. Yes. And so what we're going to do is allow Jon and Alan to give us a little bit of an update on how the COVID-19 relief programs are working and some recent changes. And then I wanted to ask Dave Janka from Auckland Charters if he would share his experience in having applied for Alaska CARES Act funds. And then I wanted to open it up for questions from you all and see what questions you might have about any of that material or requests you have for other kinds of assistance that we can provide going forward. So I think given that Jon is here, I will go ahead and turn it over to him and let Jon do what he does very well, talk about the programs.
Talk endlessly. It is it's a limited talent, but it's one I've got. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Paycheck Protection Program, a little bit about the EIDL and Eidl Advance, a little bit about what we're seeing in terms of the business community and local government response, those that received CARES funding, and we'll go from there. When it comes to the Paycheck Protection Program, this is a program that was funded through the CARES Act. It's a new program. At the time, it was new when it was created. It's basically a forgivable loan. The changes they've made, I won't go through the thing, but the changes they've made are pretty significant. The program does end at the end of this month unless Congress extends the deadline. The last day to apply for the PPP is going to be the 30th. There's still about $100 billion left in the program, a little more than that, so there's plenty of money left. The maturity rate has been extended. It was a 2-year, 1% loan for anything you didn't get forgiven. Now it's been extended to 5 years, so you have plenty of time. There's also a 10-month deferment on your first payment. So it's a pretty good loan, even if it doesn't convert, but it's going to be really hard not to convert these PPP loans. because they've extended the qualified expense time period from 8 weeks after you receive the money to 24 weeks after you receive the money. So basically, you just have to spend 2.5 times your monthly payroll within the next 6 months, basically. If you can't do that, I think that there may be something wrong with how you accounted for the monthly payroll. Another good news about it is they've shifted the percentage that has to be allocated to payroll. It used to be 75% for payroll, 25% for other qualifying expenses, including rent, mortgage, interest, utilities. Now it's a 60-40 split, so 60% towards payroll, 40% towards the other qualifying expenses. So you can use more of this to spend down on your rent payments over the next 6 months if you like. Last but not least, and there were some other minor changes, but these are the big ones. If you tried to get your employees to come back to work, or you tried to hire employees that had a comparable skill set at a comparable wage, and you could not, as long as you can prove to the SBA you made a good faith effort, they will allow you to still recover your costs. So it won't be held against you. And that's a really big change to the program. What we were finding, especially early on, is that a lot of people were having difficulty getting employees that were making under $55,000 or so to come back because they were making comparable or even in some cases more money on unemployment. And a lot of them were scared to come back because of the COVID-19 risk. In terms of how many people have received these loans, to date, as of the 12th of this month, 10,365 Alaskan companies have received a PPP loan. All told, it's about $1.22 billion in funding. Again, this was mostly under the 75-25 split, so 3/4 of this should have gone towards payroll costs, which is fairly good considering the unemployment numbers we're seeing and have seen over the last few months. When you look at this in terms of gross numbers, it's a little, Alaska looks like they're not doing very well just because, I mean, smaller state population, smaller number of businesses. A better way to look at these is percentage of payroll. And so you take the total number of businesses that could be eligible for this program under the criteria, the total number of employees those businesses have, that gives you the upper limit kind of on what you would expect to see this program be able to fund. And then you see where you fell into that range and what percentage you're at. Alaska is actually at about 70% of their eligible payroll, so that's pretty good. 3/4 of the employees that could be covered under this theoretically were covered, depending on how people expended the money. When it comes to the economic injury disaster loans, the good news here is that starting a few days ago, they were opened up again to all businesses that were originally eligible. For the last month or so, it's only been agriculture-related businesses, but they've allowed just any small business that would have been eligible under the original criteria to apply again. This is good news. The upper limit on these, it's kind of an unofficial cap on the loans, is about $150,000. That's the less good news. So the most you're probably going to get through here is about around there. One of the things I like about this program is that there's a 12-month deferment on your initial payment. So what I've been advising people to do is to go ahead and apply for this loan if it fits your financial needs, and you can hold on to it for up to 12 months without paying any payments. And at the end of those 12 months, you've got this nest egg in case things go wrong. If they didn't go wrong, give it back. There's no prepayment fee. There's no penalties to returning the money if you didn't use it. But it's going to be nice to have, because over the next 12 months, I think we're going to find a lot of these economic impacts that we're seeing aren't going to go away anytime soon. So having that money just as a rainy day fund wouldn't be a bad idea. The loan terms are fairly straightforward. It's a fixed rate, 3.75% APR loan for for-profit businesses, 2.75% for 501c3, 501c19s, religious institutions, and agricultural co-ops. And it's a process that runs directly through the federal government. It's not done through a third-party lender like the PPP program. When it comes to how many we've gotten, this one we were really slow to adopt, but we actually did end up getting much better towards the end. The last data I've got is for the 12th. 3,900 Alaskan businesses have received these loans worth a total of $252 million. We've actually gotten more of these loans than North Dakota, Wyoming, Vermont. We're on par with Montana. So states of a similar population and structure, we're actually doing better than most of them. So that was actually very reassuring. Up until A few weeks ago, they were only showing 8 to 20 loans in the entire state, and that was really disappointing. Last but not least, the other type of funding is the Eidl Advance. These are the grants up to $10,000 for people as you apply for the Eidl loans. You can also ask for to be eligible for one of these grants. It's based off the number of employees you have, so it's basically $1,000 per employee up to $10,000. Alaskan companies received 7,877 of these, worth a total of $26 million. So all told, there were about 22,000 financial transactions through the PPP, the Eidl, and the Eidl Advance program, worth roughly $1.3, $1.4 billion. The average size of the PPP grant was about $118,000. The average size of the Eidl loan was closer to $80,000. And the Eidl advances were somewhere around $4,500 to $5,000. Anecdotally, we're seeing evidence that the vast majority, even though the average is right around the middle, the vast majority of people who received any amount of funding through any of these programs is going to be above $5,000, unfortunately. So for those of you looking for the Alaska Cares funds, that means that the newly changed regulations allowing you to give back over $5,000 is probably going to become really important to you if that's something you're looking to. When it comes to returning Eidl and Eidl advances, extremely straightforward, very simple process, not difficult at all. Basically what you're going to want to do, and I'm pulling up the directions because I want to make this right. The last thing I want you to do is to send a check to the wrong place. You're basically going to write a check for the amount that you're returning. You're going to include 3 items on the memo line. One is going to be you're going to write Eidl return or Eidl advance return, depending on which one you're doing. You're also going to write your 10-digit Eidl application number on there. And then lastly, you're going to pick one of these 3, either your business name, the borrower's name, or your tax ID number. Once you put all those on the check somewhere, you're going to mail it to the SBA offices in Denver, Colorado, 721 19th Street, Denver, Colorado, 8003. And you're pretty much done. When it comes to PPP funds, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think Patricia had a question.
Yes, this in regards to EIDL.
What?
It's in regards to the EIDL. So the Valdez Museum was approved for $150,000. I have got 30 days to sign the loan documents, and I have not because the approval came right around the same time that the AK Cares funding grant became available. And then I went, oh, well, we can't do both. One's a grant, one's a loan. So I'm not feeling comfortable signing, doing the EIDL. It's such a large document. I was talking to our accountant, and he just thought that the whole loan documents were, he was kind of skeptical of it. I don't know. I guess what I'm doing is I'm seeking some advice on, should I hold out for AK Cares or should I accept this 150?
Have you ever seen there's a advertisement out there for taco shells, and the little girl said, why don't we do this guy, why don't we do that guy? And the little girl comes in and says, why don't we do both? I'm a big fan of both. The trick here is going to be the timing. So my understanding is, as long as when you apply for the Alaska Cares, and the gentleman from Ada can correct me if I'm wrong here, as long as you have been approved for or received any of these PPP or EIDL funds after the fact, receive PPP or EIDL, you're fine. Okay. So it's a snapshot in time of when you fill out the application. Now, because you've been approved, I think that may still exclude you from the program. I could be wrong on that, but if it does, the good news is you can actually turn down the EIDL loan, and then you have something like 3 to 6 months to go back to them and say, I've changed my mind.
Okay. Well, I applied for the AK Cares like midday on June 1st.
Oh, then my understanding is you're fine. You, at the time, as long as you hadn't accepted or been approved for the loan when you applied and you indicated that on the application, you can go back and you can get
I haven't signed any documents. Let's just say this. I got this email that says you've been approved for $150,000. And then I verified who I was, but I didn't sign any of the closing documents.
Mm-hmm. And you don't have to accept it. I mean, there's no penalty to saying it depends on your organization. Here's my 2 cents. There's no prepayment penalty. So if you take the funds and all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, there's something in here that I really, really don't like, you're not going to be making any payments for 12 months. Give the money back. It's just a check in the mail.
Okay. All right. I have one more question, then I'll shut up. So, does anybody in this group here have any kind of concept of a timeline on? I'm losing 40% of my operating. I know everybody here is in a panic, but I'm wondering what the turnaround time on the AK Cares applications is going to be.
I'll let the
Maybe I could try to help out with that one a bit there, John. My name is Alan Weitzner. I'm with Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority. We've been working with DCCD and with Credit Union One on the AK Cares program.
Right.
Talked with Credit Union One just yesterday, asking them exactly that same question, what the process is. And is they received, well, to date, we've received about a little over 1,500 applications. But on day one, we received over 800 applications.
Okay.
Like initial, and they've been really going, and they've been going through, and I know it's been an extended period of time since that application on June 1st, but they've been going through each one of the applications, making sure that everyone's getting the same service and the same attention and processing for those applications. And my understanding is, as of last night, they've fully gone through the initial process on those first day one applications. So you should have received a communication on that. And I do understand that what they're doing, they've added now, instead of that, well, everyone who's applying is going to get an immediate email recognizing the fact that the application is through, but they're also going to be continuing to follow up with communications, letting people know that they're still in the queue. There's a little bit of extended time to get to their application. But what I can really identify with everyone is that there should not be a concern of a lack of funds. We have total applications today, or as of yesterday, amounting to a little over 67 million. So out of the initial tranche, the pool that was dedicated to Credit Union One of 150 million, there still remains quite a bit of funding that is there. So I would say that they are definitely getting to the applications. They should have gotten through all the first ones from first day, and picking up the process for the following day's submissions.
Okay, I'm looking through my junk mail right now, since I was one of those eager beavers and submitted, and I haven't received anything. So I'm hoping it fell into the spam folder or something.
Okay. Well, Patricia, what you can also do is send me some information and I'll follow up.
Okay, that would be great. Could you put your information in the
But if you give it to Kristen, she has my contact.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
The only other thing I was going to mention is that returning a PPP loan is much more complicated. We're actually working with SBA right now to try to figure out how to make that work. It may be lender dependent. There's a lot of moving parts on it, so I don't have really good guidance on that just yet, but I'm hopeful that in the next few days, SBA and I will be able to put together a how-to guide similar to the one for EIDL.
And John, if I could add a little bit to what you had highlighted before, is the functionality of it is based upon if you've secured the funding. So if you've been approved for it, right, you've applied for it, you've actually end up receiving the SBA number that comes through that's counted as being secured in that case. So you have access now to those funds. So that would be a limitation on your eligibility to AK Cares, because you have the alternative source of funding that's coming under the federal programs. However, if you do follow the process of ultimately returning that and making the decision, on the basis of applying for AK Cares, then go forward with that on eligibility.
And it's still okay if they receive it after the application, though, right? When you apply, you have nothing, but afterwards you get a PPP or EIDL, that's still all right?
I don't know if that's the case, John. I know you had highlighted that, but with the application process, we have people that are certifying whether they have received or not received those funds based upon the eligibility of the guidelines. And then there's a certification that the information in the application is true and correct. So it would still be an issue that if you have received at a later point in time, then that information would no longer be true and correct.
And my understanding from the Department of Commerce was that the application was a snapshot in time. So as long as it was true when you signed it, that it was eligible. That's what they've been telling the ARDers anyway, that we've been pushing out. So if that's not
okay. Well, then that would be the correction. They are the ones that are really determining that. So
okay.
If that's the information that you're hearing from DCCED, that would be the case.
Okay.
Hey, John, this is Sandra with DCRA, and I wanted to confirm that is the case, that what John said is correct, the position of the department. Thank you.
Hi, Sandra.
Hi.
Thank you, Sandra.
Just to confirm, it's the application review process goes by what people have received or applied for at the time. It's looking at that snapshot. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So is it based on what you've received or what you've been offered? Because
Me
yeah,
too.
but I've been offered an EIDL, but I haven't accepted it.
Me too.
Well, it's the way that the program was originally set up, and that ultimately then leads to what we highlight on some of the changes that are coming up, is that the way it was originally set up is based upon this definition of secured. So if you have been offered, you have secured that funding. However, with the changes that have been announced and discussed with the House Finance Committee as of yesterday, were issued a little bit earlier this morning, the new guidelines that we're putting in place would say that if you haven't received those funds, you're in effect returning them. So in this case, you would be eligible for AK Cares. So the language, the way that it is being highlighted, is that for small businesses are unable to participate in AK Cares program if they receive any CARES Act funding, even if they return the federal funds. The change that's coming is that a small business will become eligible if they return federal funds in excess of the $5,000 cap, that they then become eligible. Now, ultimately in saying that, you're effectively then returning those funds, right, to the EIDL in favor of the AK Cares program. But you do need to balance that yourself and determine whether that's the right way to go forward with it, based upon that we do have a cap in the program as well. But what I would highlight at this point in time is that of the 150 million cap and the available or dedicated funding upwards of 289 million, there's currently applications in place of a little over 67 million. So that would say that there's room. I hope that's helpful.
So
Yeah.
I have a question too after you, Kathy. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, the way that you read that, it made it sound to me like we had to have received it, not just been offered it. And I was wondering, since Sandra's on the line, if she could confirm that.
Yes, that's how we understand it, and that is correct how you stated it. You'd have to have received it. And like Alan was saying, returning that then make you eligible for the new changes.
Thank you.
So my name is Anisha, and we had initially started the EIDL application, but then discussed it as a couple and decided we didn't want the loan. And so we received a couple of automated phone calls to, encourage us to follow through with the process. And so I finally returned their call with a thanks, but no thanks. And when I received an actual person I was notified they'd actually deposited $1,000 into our account, even though I said we had 0 employees. And I was shocked, surprised, and frankly hadn't even noticed because it was a couple of weeks before, when we were being uber careful with our money, hadn't spent any. And then in the midst of that, I had applied for the Alaska CARES grant. So I kind of got on here a little bit late. Am I understanding correctly? I need to return that $1,000 in order to be eligible for the grant that's coming through specifically for Alaska?
I would say my answer to you would be no, that you don't need to return that, because one of the changes that's coming is saying that if you've received $5,000 or less from SBA, EIDL, or P3, then you're going to be eligible for under AK CARES.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Can I ask John a quick question about the EIDL? We, not for the Chamber of Commerce, but for our own business, we've been offered it. But looking at the collateral, pretty scary. It says basically everything you own is collateral, and that's a little nerve-wracking. Can somebody just speak to that?
Absolutely, yeah. I would suggest that their default, the SBA's default for these things is to sort of over ask, honestly, on a lot of their terms. You don't have to accept the terms they offer. You can go back and say, I'm sorry, this doesn't make any sense. If the assets that they're collateralizing are more than the loan that you're receiving, which is the case in several loans that we've looked at, there's no way that that really makes any sense. So you can go back and try to get them to more reasonable terms. The other thing I'll say is that, I think that there is going to be a very large incentive on the government's part to not try and repossess a bunch of people's stuff. This isn't like a loan program. This is a national catastrophe of unprecedented proportions. And if they go back and they start punishing businesses that they were trying to save on top of whatever else is coming, I mean, that's a really rough look. I'm not suggesting that it can't happen. I'm not telling you what to do, but I would say, A, go back to SBA, counteroffer a more reasonable collateralization or other terms, and B, if it's within reason, you can always return the funding as long as you're not planning on expending it all right off the bat. So those are the two things I would suggest.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Are there other questions for John? I mean, I think he might stay on for a little bit, so it's not to say that this is your absolute last chance, but I know Alan has some good information to share too about the Alaska CARES program. So I thought if you didn't have questions for John right at the moment, we could move on to Alan. If you think of questions, you are certainly welcome to type them into the chat window, or there's also, I should have reviewed this earlier, but at the very bottom of the screen, if you're on a computer, I'm not sure how it looks on a phone, but on the reactions button, if you click on that, I thought there was an option to raise your hand. Maybe that's in the
participant, I think. No, I don't know.
No, I'm not seeing that either.
It's in your participants.
Right.
And then it's in the bottom right of.
Oh, bottom right. Lower all hands. Anyway, yeah. Okay. Anyway, just a few little housekeeping things. Okay, thanks. So I think with that, I will turn it over to Alan from the Alaska Industrial Development Export Administration, and you can share with us, give an update on the Alaska CARES Act funding. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. I know, Kristen, you got to have the most updated numbers, and what I'd like to share with everyone is and I think probably I've already shared parts of this data in answering some of the questions or highlighting it. But as of yesterday's program, we've received 1,545 applications in total. And the total amount of funding that's being requested under that is in excess of, well, it's very close to $67 million. The average amount that's being requested is in the range of 45,000. I do highlight in some of the discussions, and I think a few of you have heard that, is that when we were originally looking at what the need was amongst the small businesses and the outreach that we had done and talking with different businesses that at that time had not had access to P3, because this was actually at the first round, and businesses that ultimately were trying to do funding under the EIDL. Most of that was in the range of between 30 to 50,000. So that's why we structured the CARES program to 5,000 up to 100,000, and focusing on businesses that were 50 employees or less, because that looked to be the gap that was missing on that initial round of the P3. And then what happened was, well, the second round came about. I think the banks, lending institutions, credit unions that were doing the program had the process in place, were a little more comfortable. They actually were quicker in getting the applications in place and servicing Alaska's businesses in need. And we saw that a lot more were covered versus the gap that was initially identified. Then during the process of it, what also occurred, which caught us a little off guard and certainly was not what we were expecting, was all of a sudden the EIDL program became effective. When we were doing the structuring on the program back in early May, and talking with the legislature, there really was no EIDL funding, and no one had really received any of the initial grants that were coming through. And then once I think it was a few weeks actually prior to the implementation of the program on June 1st, all of a sudden everyone started, as a few of you had commented, everyone all looked in their bank account and they had received $1,000, $2,000, something on that side. So that's what we're trying to adapt to and really know what the needs of the businesses that are out there for AKA Cares is, not exclude those parties. So that's part of the changes that have come into play that I'd like to highlight a little bit, but I know we've talked a little bit generally on. Kristen, you had also asked the question of how much in funding has been done to date. And at this point, there's been approved 87 grants for a total of close to $3 million in funding. 15 of those have been in defined rural areas within the state of Alaska, the remainder in defined urban areas. On AIDA's website, we show the geographic dispersion of the applications that are coming through under the program to date, as well as the grants that have been funded to date and where those locations are. And I think in addressing some of the questions that were raised a little bit earlier, the focus of Credit Union 1 with the initial program guidelines has really been through working through the first days massive of applications and responding back to those parties on really the processes that's there. One of the things that they've done to improve communications with small businesses on the application process is they put in place a video, and that was done as of last week, and really would ask people as they're preparing applications or still looking at their applications is have a look at that video, see if there's information there that is helpful, ultimately identifying what should be a simpler process of application than what I'm sure many of you have gone through in an early stage of P3 if you had in that case. But let me then address some of the changes that have been discussed now with the House Finance Committee. The Department of Law was looking at the initial guidelines. What we've communicated now, and I think Kristen, you've shared with the group, is that parties that have received, or in this case secured, that meaning have actually received funding of $5,000 or less in the P3 or EIDL will now be eligible for the AK Cares funding program. And really would ask you to please put in place your applications when we're ready to receive those applications and these guidelines. The issue is that we really do not want to have double dipping. Like if you have identified, I guess in that P3 piece, a specific cost that you received that funding, then we want to know, we're going to look for verification of what funding you have received under those programs, know what expense was related to, and please identify different expenses than what you've received funding under those programs. The other change was relative to exclusions for if you had received direct funding under, our limitation has been that you cannot have received direct funding under the CARES Act under the direct federal programs. That was interpreted to mean earlier on that limited your ability to access some of the municipality programs that are being put in place, or community programs are being put in place, because they had received CARE Act funding through the state and ultimately then defined different small business relief programs. That's no longer an issue. We're highlighting that you can receive those programs. It's really up to the municipalities and the communities in that case and whether they're offering those programs if there's an issue with double dipping. But for AK Cares, that's not going to be a limitation. And please don't take that as a limitation, your ability to make an application. The one element that was also identified was the inclusion of 501c6s to the program. And we're looking at ultimately how we're defining those eligible expenses, particularly related to 501c6s. And then there's the general issue that we discussed that was highlighting that if you have received funding from EIDL or P3, are you able to actually return those funds and then be eligible for AK Cares? And the answer is yes. In that case, you would be able to. Example being, if you received 6,000, 7,500, 10,000, and you return 5,000 of it, then you're at that threshold of having received 5,000 in funding from those programs, and you're eligible in that case. The program itself is going to be, we're currently working on the detail and the mechanics behind the change in the guidelines. We're also looking at bringing in additional program operators to be working with Credit Union 1. So that's also to expedite funding, ultimately processing applications. So we'll be announcing within the next few days how that program is going to be specifically rolled out and when we'll be looking to receive applications for these changes under the program. I'd leave it open to if anyone has any questions that I may be able to address.
Oh, I should have raised. Can I raise my hand this way?
Yes,
I have
please.
a quick question. As I said, I applied for AK Cares and for people to support for the time frame from March 11th, then 8 weeks after the application, and that's roughly $156,000 worth of payroll for me. And then it says that you have to spend it by December 31st. Now, obviously, we're struggling this year. I'm losing 40%. I'm not even open. I'm losing 40% of my operating revenues. So, okay. Can you confirm that you have to spend the funds by December 31st? And will there be funds to start the new year off to shore up the deficits moving into hopefully a successful 2021 tourist season?
For AK Cares, which receives funding from the federal government's allocation to the state on the coronavirus relief fund, I believe is what's called specifically, those funds have to be, by federal regulation, they have to be spent by actually December 30th.
Okay, well, December 30th. Yeah. Okay.
But I don't know if there's going to be some additional funding that would then be following that date. But under the current guidelines for the grant funding that we've received to be able to allocate for small business relief, that has to be spent by December 30th.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm and then inquire if there was a possibility of any funds available in the first part of 21. Thank you.
Alan, this is Kelly from the Whittier Chamber of Commerce, and my question is trying to basically understand the flow through. So the federal government gave the state money to help small businesses, and basically we're calling the CARES Act, I'll ask AK Cares Act. And then the state is giving some to communities or municipalities, and then it's up to those municipalities to either use it themselves for their communities or to pass on to businesses. So is that right? I'm trying to understand the flow through. And then as a business, where do you go to first? Do you go to your to the state and apply, or do you go to your community or municipality?
One of the clarifications that we're making with the program is highlighting that in this case, you can go to both. It's not going to limit your ability to go to AK Cares. Prior to that, prior to this clarification right on the change, there was that limitation that you needed to have come to us first and not have received or secured, in this case, any direct funding from anything that was related to the CARES Act. But we're clarifying the program to highlight that you actually can, you can come to AK Cares, and if a municipality or community program is providing some other type of small business relief, that's available to you. It's really up to them and how they're defining how they want to approach issues of potential double dipping for similar expenses.
I don't have definitive information from any of the municipalities, Valdez, Cordova, or Whittier, but they're all looking at different ways of using some of their municipal CARES Act funding to provide either to businesses or to households, or maybe some combination of both. But yeah, that none of that I think has been decided in any of those communities. But like what Alan said, it doesn't. You don't have to choose.
Kristen, do you know how much each community received in the CARES Act?
I don't know about Valdez and Whittier. I know that Cordova got a total of, or is getting a total of 3.4 million, and they have a proposed allocation, but I think every community is probably going to do it a little bit differently.
I also heard word today that Rasmussen is doing a one-to-one match with any community that is interested in investing. Any municipal CARES funding. Well, here it is. Rasmussen just announced that they're providing matching dollars to municipalities that use CARES money to support local arts and culture. And I've got the link here. I can share it with you if you're not familiar with it.
Great, thank you. That's breaking news.
Yes, I just learned that today. Here you go. I just sent it to everyone.
Thank you.
So if so each of us have to go, well, so there you go. It's right there.
Great.
It's exciting. Nice public-private partnership.
Mm-hmm.
And as I understand it, the municipality has to kind of take that first step in saying that they're going to be using part of their CARES Act to support the Arts Council or the Arts Festival. There's specific guidelines on who's eligible for that. And Kristen, I also wanted to just make a quick comment that there have been several questions I saw come up in the chat, and as you wanted to maybe address those to if they haven't been covered already, to the appropriate person.
Yeah, some of it's been covered, but Anisha, you did have that question about a business license requirement.
I did. So on the application, the checklist specifically, it asks if your business is a business, sole proprietorship, LLC, etc. We operate a fishing business, a commercial fishing business, as an LLC. And so when I submitted our application, I submitted those documents required of the LLC. We do operate as a business as well, but normally we don't get our business license until around the first week of May, because that's when we start actually fishing, but our LLC is in place year round. So will we not be eligible because we didn't have the actual paper license or the actual license renewed March 11th, 2020? We've been in business since 2011.
This is an application to AK Cares that you're talking about?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Yeah, we've received actually quite a few questions on that. And what we've highlighted is that, one, it's important to us that you do have an active and valid business license. So when you do apply for AK Cares, you need to have that active business license. However, if you have the license available, if the previous active license, right, if it wasn't in place as of March 11, 2020, but you had it in place for calendar year 2019, then you're eligible.
Okay.
not have it in place calendar year 2019, and it's only valid before, you're not going to be eligible.
Understood. And then I had another question regarding that. So most of the commercial fishermen, and you've probably received this question as well, they operate as a business, an entrepreneur selling their fish personally to the canneries. Is the legislature or whoever the powers that be going to consider a commercial fishing permit as a business license for those that don't actually have a business license?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not able to answer that question because I really don't know. The way that we set up the program was really focused on an active, valid, companies based in Alaska with a business license.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Great. Are there other questions for John or Alan?
Can we just put in the chat the best place to access an application for the AK Cares?
Sure. I will look up
The applications are available on Credit Union One's site. However, the applications are for the existing program. So the changes that are coming that we've talked about, really, everyone needs to wait until we have the applications in place that are adopting the changes that are here, and we're currently putting in place the mechanics that are for that. So DCCED, and by reference, Eidl cited, we pointed to the information on DCCED's website. And certainly, Credit Union One will host the information as well. We'll identify the updated FAQs when we have that information all put together, and we'll also be updating the date of when the application will be available.
So what if we've already applied, assuming that $1,000 wouldn't make us ineligible?
Well, it depends on when it ultimately gets processed by Credit Union One, but it may be ultimately denied for that one reason. However, you would then be able to reapply under the changes on the program.
Okay, thanks.
And then the other thing too I would highlight is that even through even if you got then a denial on that basis, we have an appeal process where you would give us notification. We would look at that. Obviously, we would know what the reason was that you're highlighting because of that. We know it's under the new program that's coming up.
I just have one more question, then I have to sign off because I got a board meeting to go to. So I'm also the board president of the Valdez Convention and Visitors Bureau, and we're a 501c6. So should we hold off and not use the Credit Union One application and wait until Ada has the new one available?
Patricia, you're going to need to wait on that one because that would mean that would be with the new application coming through, because otherwise it would just be denied because you wouldn't, on the application itself right now, it restricts it to 501c3s and 501c19.
Okay, did you get that, Sharon? Hold until the new application.
Right.
Okay, I got board members texting me, so I'm signing off. Thank you all. This was very helpful.
And Patricia, I did just post the links in the chat box for the Credit Union One page, but as Alan said, just give it a little bit of time until those changes are, propagated through the system.
For the CPB. Okay. My other application is a 501c3, so.
Well, we're really hopeful that the changes make a difference for everyone, and that with the announcement with the program and then with the application, they'll be there, very specific for that information we need.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Alan, just one more question. Time, you think it's a week, a couple days down the line for the changes? And I know some of these loans came out and they said first come, first serve. So is that the case, or people they be sitting on the computer waiting for those changes to come through and then act quickly?
It's still going to be under a first come, first served basis. But what I'm highlighting is that we have, again, with the program, with the amount of funding, dedicated at up to $289 million, we have and currently applications of about 67 million. So we're working as quickly as we can, ultimately putting in place the new applications. We're looking to bring on an additional program operator to work with the current program guidelines and with these changes. So to make the process a little bit quicker, more expedited for the businesses that are applying. So we're looking to pull all that together. I can't identify exactly how long that's going to take right now because we're trying to figure out these mechanics, but we're looking to put it in place as quickly as we can.
So, other questions for John or Alan? And if you think of questions after this, of course you can contact me, and John put his contact information into the chat bar, so that's available to everybody. I have Alan's email address also. I've posted the links to the Credit Union One page and to the ADA page, so you can, and also I was going to say, so you can look up the map of that illustrates where applications are coming from and which ones have been funded. Although when I load that page, I've never seen the map. It doesn't load in my browser. I don't know if my internet is just too creaky or what the deal is, but I haven't seen the map. But John also posted, and John posted in the chat bar the list of what municipalities are getting from the CARES funding. So that's in there too. So that's a lot of great information. Yeah, so I asked David Janka of Auckland Charters. He operates a charter vessel in Prince William Sound. I think people in Valdez and Cordova and Whittier probably all know David, and there he is. But he applied on June 1st, just like Pat Relay did. And so I thought, well, great, let's hear from somebody who's actually been through the process, and I asked him to share his experience with us. I used the word in one of the email correspondence. I said, could you share your successful experience with us? And he said, well, I'm not sure I would call it that just yet. But anyway, I'll turn it over to David. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen, and thanks everybody. Like real informative for a lot of folks. I hustled a little bit trying to figure out how successful it was, and everything did come through. So it's all done and check received, and even creditors have received checks. So it's definitely, I'm a small business looking at some of these figures people are throwing out. I'm like, gee, maybe I should have put in for a little more somehow or another. It's a big help. Yeah, I set my alarm that morning, downloaded the applications and submitted them, I think 1 p.m. on the 1st. And by the 6th, I got a confirmation that it was approved. And after some hassles about how you get the money, check was received on the 9th. So I found it went really, really well. I know the application says that there's either a check or an account waiting you at Credit Union One, but they insisted on mailing it, which I wasn't that comfortable with, that, a significant check, especially when they say right in there that they are not responsible for any loss. But anyway, we got that squared away, and it did get mailed. And there were some things that came out wrong. It's just it's like a one-size-fits-all application. So it was hard to see how reimbursements fit into that format that they had on there, which was really set up more for creditors. And then and a little confusion as far as what's already been paid, what hasn't been paid, invoices versus receipts. Seems pretty straightforward, but it wasn't, so I made a few little hiccups in there. And the one that was bothersome is as a boat owner, boat-based business, our quote unquote rent or our slip fee is annual. And it comes up now for me as an annual fee, but they were only willing to pay 1 month of that slip fee, and that's all. So I'm still responsible for you have to pay. And that for me, that's a nice big chunk of money I have to put out, whether I'm working or not. But that was a little frustrating, but maybe I could look at the municipal flow-through monies for the remainder of that, possibly. But yeah, I think having a more than one format for submitting your expenses would be nice, because I kind of shoved them in there as best as I could, which seemed to work. And they did comment on the first phone call that most of my I's were dotted and T's were crossed and boxes filled in. And I think that made a difference in things moving along quick. So be sure you're look at it, make sure everything possible is filled in. And I figured if I did anything wrong, the important thing was getting it in there quick at the top of the pile. And I just can't imagine what their pile looks like right now. But I don't know if anybody has any questions about what any other things I experienced with it.
Looks like
I
Kathy.
do. Oh,
I'm sorry.
I just had a question. I'm just curious as to why only 1 month of your boat slip would be paid when the money was also for future payments.
Well, that's the only thing so my previous year of slip fee went through the end of June. So then the future 8 weeks were for June and July. So they figured they only owed me for just July. So they took my annual, divided it by 12, and only paid off that 1 month, which is the future 8 week thing. So I questioned that a couple of times and didn't get much response on it. Like I say,
So the grant is.
I don't know if the appeals process would allow that, or look at the municipal flow-through money for that.
Well, yeah, because it's not a monthly payment that we make on a normal basis. It's an annual payment.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I agree with you. Yeah.
And it's a hard one. Somebody's sitting in an office in a big city and trying to understand that as opposed to a monthly rent. So.
David, could I ask you a question about the process that you had with the Credit Union One? How many
Sure.
times did you interact with the representative from Credit Union One?
I think there were two phone calls with some extra questions. One of them was some other information about setting up an account, which is the way I was expecting this, is that I would have a Credit Union One account. I come in there and either use the account or ask for a check or take cash even, he said. So there was some questions with that, but that got completely thrown out the window the next day when they said, oh, no, we're cutting checks and we just want this money out the door. And then I had being out and around, semi-isolating, and some issues to deal, personal issues in Anchorage. I'm not in Cordova, so I wanted the check sent somewhere else. So that ended up being another letter, and that was a third person to kind of get that squared away.
Was the process smooth in the discussions with them?
For the most part, yes. The first two, asking a couple of, just getting a resident address correct. That's always a challenge sometimes up here with PO boxes, and then the account setup, which was mute. The third one with this letter for mailing the check, and why does it have to be mailed and stuff, that got a little cumbersome. And then I was questioning that same person about the slip fee, and by accident I send a invoice that I handwritten that I paid it with my business visa, but it was a invoice and not a receipt. So that company, I believe, has gotten paid for something that's already been paid. So I've contacted them how we're going to work that one out. So that last one ended up being a little cumbersome, and then sort of I think I just got put in the done file and never got back to me.
Okay, well, thank you. I just wanted, with you being available, just wanted to see how the process was. It's just good for us to know on that side, because we hear one side of it, but we do need to be getting feedback from the people that have been through the process and how they've actually received the funding.
The only thing I can really suggest to everybody is, boy, if you submit an invoice, that company will be paid directly from Credit Union One. So you want to be sure that that is an unpaid invoice with the proper information for a check being sent to them. And if you're looking for a reimbursement in a check directly to you, then that's a receipt that shows your business name and that it has been paid via check or Visa or whatever. And then those ones in the future, I guess you guys have figured that one out. I just had to estimate a couple of expenses from different companies, and I suspect they're just going to get a check for those amounts, and it just is credited to my accounts. I suppose that was kind of.
That's how we had anticipated would be with the with the people predicting, or looking at their expenses right 8 weeks out, that you have either you're stocking up, re-inventory, you're buying fuel, you're doing something where you're identifying that this is expenditure I'm going to have over this period of time, and can the vendor with it, that you're identifying, all right, pay them directly, I have that credit in place, or I have this invoice, like I made this order to restock or do something for your business that's needed in that eight weeks in the reopening phase. That was our anticipation with it.
Okay, yeah.
Dave Kelly Bender here. So the application process was you had to specify what you wanted it paid on and the amounts, and the money didn't go directly to you. It actually went to your vendors.
Yes, that's correct. For anything that you have not paid that is accepted as a business expense. So I tried to get, like I say, I tried to get the slip fee, which is due at the end of this month, paid, but they would only pay the 1 month of July for that June, July, 8 weeks in advance thing. That was probably the most frustrating one. And then there was a smaller one for some fire extinguishers and inspections that I had paid, but it wasn't clear on the invoice I said that I'd paid it. So they're going to get paid twice, and I guess I'm just going to have to work it out with them how they want to do that.
So Dave and Alan, so that means the process is actually you write out exactly your expenses and where and who you owe them to. That's the application process, unlike EIDL or PPP. You just said I need this amount.
That's correct, Kelly.
So okay, great.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, if you can explain the application process, because that's why I'm listening, is to be able to pass on the information to our members.
Yeah. The way that we set it up was on controlled disbursement. It's exactly as David is highlighting it, is that we're requesting people with the schedule of eligible expenses to identify the expenses that they've incurred or maybe are held in arrears that are historical. So either that's a payment to yourself, as a receipt, as David was highlighting, because you've covered that expense through a certain way, or if it was a historical expense that we have allocated reimbursement of debt up to 24 months, including your credit card. So maybe you incurred debt on your credit card to cover current expenses. You would give that information that would highlight that payment which should be made to your credit card company for those expenses that are related to that. And then the amounts that you have in the future, identifying either that you have an invoice like you ordered inventory or you ordered PPE and you need that vendor to be paid, or that's for payroll, which is your own company, so you get that to disperse directly to yourself. It's by the eligible expenses and who the payor or payee is under that.
So that's spelled out pretty clearly on the application, I'm sure. Thank you.
So I'm looking at the CARES Act funding program informational sheet and checklist right now. And under how do I calculate the grant amount in the application, it's talking about the eligible expenses. And it says eligible expenses incurred by the applicant business from March 11th through the application date, plus eligible expenses to be incurred by the applicant over the 8 weeks after the application date to restaff, reopen. So there's some items that businesses might need to buy to reopen, like sneeze guards or masks or dispensers for hand sanitizer. Things like that. So those would not, if they haven't actually bought those things yet, then they can't actually put those on there. Is that what I'm understanding?
if you haven't ordered them or you haven't acquired them yet, then it falls into an area that we've defined as a portion of the funds that you're estimating that don't have a verified expenditure that's attached to it, that would be dispersed to you, and that's limited to 25% of the total grant that's in place. So what I would suggest, and it really depends upon the timing that you have, is that if you know that you're going to be incurring those and you're looking for reimbursement effectively through the grant program, is order it, have the invoice, and have that paid directly through the future expense, especially if there's a question of the amounts that you're looking at applying for ultimately under the grant program.
Again,
So I have,
go ahead.
So back to the commercial fishing business, and I know this is probably gonna, throw the credit union for some loops. But so the slip fee for us, just going back to that, is an annual payment. It's not a monthly payment. So I guess if it comes down to it on ours, it's a significant amount. It's $3,400 for us. And so that, I guess I have a question about, will that be considered a payment? It's not a monthly payment according to the city. And also, when I applied, initially I listed our boat and permit payment as part of the request, because that's something that we need to, fund to operate. Would that be still a consideration?
I don't know the specific answer to that, but what I will do is I'll get the information from Kristen and we'll talk about internal.
So Kelly, it's not as that explained that straightforward in that application. They have those 3 categories of expenses, owed money, and the future ones. And they want all the information fit into one form in the bottom. And that was pretty confusing. You have to kind of creatively make it fit and understandable in that. That's where I think that, a separate little spreadsheet for expenses, a separate one for outstanding invoices, and another one for future expenses, with the categories being a little better explanatory, would have helped a lot in that. So, but I think just getting it creatively crammed into that format they have, which I think they were hoping for a one size fits all, will work. It worked for me, cramming them in there at least.
David, you're absolutely right. We were hoping for a one size fit. We're trying to simplify it as much as possible and reduce the schedules that are behind it.
Sure. Thank you.
Kathy, did you have a question?
So I raised my hand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That probably wasn't me anymore. So go ahead, Sylvia.
Thanks. So I we have a division of labor in my relationship with my husband, being our partnership here in business, and he does all of this. I'm an artist. I'm not allowed to touch numbers, but I do recall a lot of his, he was supposed to be on tonight, but he's not.
I think he is.
So, he is?
Mm-hmm. I see a Greg Meyer.
Then he needs to speak up, because he's done all of this. I just get the moans and groans and the walks across the living room talking about it. But the lack of amortization of costs is a real problem, which the fishermen are discussing. But because every year, we're in the hospitality business, so we gear up every January, February, because we are going to start ordering in March to be ready in April and May. So we had geared up with our annual, loan to the bank and our expenses. So we're not in arrears, but we're using money that ordinarily makes money by this time of year, and now it's no longer making money.
So not to be able to amortize that going forward was, I know, a frustration in filling out these forms, because it's still an expense, and it's an expense at a higher rate than these loans came in at, and in grants. But if Greg, if you're on here, speak up, because I don't know from what I speak, but hello.
I'm on here.
There you go.
I just
Oh,
had,
goody.
I had
No,
an email
I'm
I had to
checking out.
respond
I'm
to.
going to hit mute here.
I found it frustrating. Just I do a lot of loans and stuff, and this just isn't a typical bank loan. And trying to fit everything in the cute little boxes just didn't really cut it for me. So I filled in all the boxes and then just did my own spreadsheet and said, "Here it is. Here's what I paid. Here's what I owe. Here's my mortgages," and let them figure it out. I applied on June 5th and heard back. Let me see. I heard back right away that they received it, and then I just heard back today that they would be contacting me in 2 to 3 weeks. So I see, listening to the amount of money you have and the people that responded and the money you've got out there, it's, I hate to be critical, but you're not doing a very good job of getting money out there. If that's a fraction of what's available. And it was, for me, it was a pretty onerous. I almost quit 2 or 3 times just because I felt like I wasn't doing it right. And I've never applied for a grant. I've never got free money. So it felt hard for me to do anyway. And it was just a bit complicated. And you want to pick your money up at the bank, or you want them to mail it. And, I've already paid bills, and you're going to mail it to them. And then I'm going to have to go back to them and get my money back and track my money that was sent out. And I was pretty critical of the process. And the money's not getting out there, one of my businesses has lost $800,000 in the last couple months. We're never going to make that up. And these monies are just going out to businesses, and it doesn't matter how much you've lost, how much you're going to lose. I don't know. I'm critical of the process, but I'm probably not a good one to speak. So I was just listening. Thanks.
Greg, from my side, I appreciate your comments. And you're absolutely right. It's not going out quick enough. One of the issues that we've had to do in ultimately putting together the program is follow the federal guidelines that are required ultimately in the utilization of the funds. And there's a process that needs to be applied that we know that the funds are being actually used for COVID-19 related expenses issues that are affecting the small businesses and its ability to ultimately repay, or ability to pay its expenses as they're coming due. So it's all been part of the program and defining it of the guidelines that ultimately we had. And there were very few guidelines at first, and then there was some additional guidance that came into it, and it's been a mix of things that we've been having to deal with as well. So we put together a program that we thought, at least I'll tell you the methodology, the mindset that we had at the point. And hindsight being 2020, we would have done some things very differently. We put in place a program that focused really on expenses, and what we tried to do was expand it beyond what we saw as some of the current limitations on the other federal programs under P3 and some of the EIDL funding. So we incorporated, the ability like people to repay, knowing that people had put debt onto their credit cards or had incurred some short-term loans to cover off the immediate expenses, is being able to pay those obligations, to identify very specific expenses that we can track and say, okay, this was it. This is a direct expense. Can't be any question on the use of those federal funds for that small business relief, and just have it documented through there. But I hear your criticism. I hear the point also about that it's just it feels like a slug of a process, and that but I do have to say is I'm surprised to hear what you're saying about receiving a notification that'll take 2 to 3 weeks to get your application. that'll be something that I'll be talking with Credit Union about, because that should not be the case. And again, after knowing that they've worked through day one, and the amount of the application that came through there, knowing the number of people that they have that's dedicated to the program, knowing the customer service that really they're applying to it, I think I don't think it would be 2 to 3 weeks that you're looking at.
Yeah, I just got that notification just a couple hours ago, so I'm not sure.
We got one of those too, Greg.
And also another critique, if I may. I just started 2 new businesses, construction businesses, at the beginning of the year, and we talked to the loan officers in Juneau, and they were going to, quote, fast track these because of this COVID stuff. And it seemed like they were going through fast, and all of a sudden, when the Alaska Cares thing came up, it seems like they pulled all of their loan officers to answer phone calls. And so my other state loans got put on hold, and I'm into like 3 months of trying to get those processed. And those loans won't be eligible for the CARES Act because we're just starting a business and we don't really have a lot of expenses. And we don't have any we hadn't had any employees yet. So we never got a chance to even get them off the ground. So those are a couple more issues that I had.
Greg, I would say we haven't made you happy across the board, and I apologize on that side. But I hear your comments. I would say send me some information, and I will get it across the board from the the parties that are looking at the Small Business Economic Development Loan Program, which I'm assuming you're referring to in that case, and we'll also be talking with Credit Union 1.
Yeah, I was doing a rural development loan and a state SBA loan also for those 2 new businesses starting up. And then when I had questions on the Alaska CARES Act one, my loan officers that I'd been working with these other loans was answering my questions. So I know they've been pulling people off for this. So it's pretty frustrating, but we do appreciate the money. So it's not all critical. Thank you.
Well, again, thank you for your comments. Honestly, it's feedback we need to hear.
Kelly again, Whittier Chamber. I'm very familiar with the PPP and EIDL. I did that for our own business, and there was lots of help. I could email SBA and get questions asked. But for our chamber, this Alaska CARES Act is going to be much more appropriate for them. And for me to be able to help answer questions, or really, where can they go for these quick, confused questions, where SBA locally was able to respond to my just quick questions. Where can people go when they're filling out the CARES Act application?
There is a hotline that's been set up on Credit Union 1, and on the site that they have for AK Cares, it has on that where you can download the application, but it also has 2 ways of communicating with them, either through the phone line or through the email that's on that side. There's also been support, as Greg was highlighting, there's been support that's been coming from the Economic Development Group within DCCED in answering questions on that side. But principally, people should be calling Credit Union 1 right now with questions on it. The other thing then, as we're rolling out the changes that are in the program and bringing in, again, we have a RFP on the street to ultimately bring in other program operators. We'll be identifying hotlines for them as well to answer questions. So we should be getting more. To me, the critical issues then that we need more people that are on our side of the table focusing on processing the applications as they're coming through. So we're trying to broaden that group, which then means there's more avenues as well to be asking the questions, getting more people to answer those questions directly.
If I can throw in as well, the SBDC has a daily briefing every day at 2 p.m. Some folks from the DCCED's Division of Investments have participated. We get other individuals as well. We also collect all the questions that we're gathering. We're partnered up with several municipalities as well that have hotlines, taking those questions, packaging them, and sending them on to CU1 and Division of Investments as well to get those answered. We got a running FAQ on multiple websites to try and make that as easy as possible. So anything we can do to help, we're also a resource.
And that's part of the mechanics I was talking about with the changes that are coming that we're looking to incorporate into that information as well. So it gets disseminated as clearly as possible. And I think one of the key things is that we learned from the initial rollout with the second, tranche that's coming in, that we're able to get the information out up front about really how this process will work, how we'll be answering the questions, what is eligible, what's not going to be eligible, and just, how to handle. And John, I don't think that's one of the great pieces of information you were highlighting is, how to handle return of funds if that's one of the choices that's being made.
Well, this has been super, super helpful, John and Alan. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
I have one more question just about eligible expenses. So our events that we put on, like our festivals that we put on as a chamber, a lot of them take place at a venue in town, and that venue is going to be increasing the cost to use the venue to cover the extra disinfection that they're going to have to put on. And then additionally, they're going to be putting in place some requirements for distancing within the facility. So in order to have the same amount of people in the room, we're going to have to rent it twice. So for things like that, those are fees that we're anticipating are going to be more than we're used to spending. And I'm not sure how to put that on, is that not going to be something I can even put in here?
I don't know the answer to that question. I would say, Kathy, what I would say is that clearly highlighting COVID-19 related expenses that you're incurring as a business that would be covered that would be eligible under the AK Cares program. So I think it really matters on the case of the way that we're doing the time periods is when is your event occurring? What are those expenses that you're preparing for ultimately for it? And how do you quantify that by identifying what that specific eligible expense is? Like, what is the fee ultimately that you're charging that reflects that additional expense? That's one of the things I think you're going to have to give that documentation and information, the verification piece behind it that supports the request.
Yeah, maybe I could get them to give me an invoice ahead of time or something.
That is always going to be helpful, is having, we're looking to on the verification side, having that supporting information of, having in the schedule that Dave was highlighting, have that schedule, that list. And I know, as Greg highlighted, it's not the easiest form to work with, but it's the simplest that we thought would be in place, that people could just list out exactly what you're looking at and what you're requesting to be funding, ultimately getting to that number that you're asking for in the grant application. So if you have anything that's in that list, in that eligible list, the verification that you have behind it, that supports it, will make it an easier process for you.
So Kathy, that as somebody who, we do venues and hospitality, that's not a bad line item to start putting on our, you bring up something that I hadn't thought about, because we certainly serve people who are doing the same thing we're doing, which is applying for grants and whatnot, and identifying what is COVID related and what is not. But maybe what we need is a line item surcharge for COVID related extra special services or extra services related to COVID, that I never thought about it before, but certainly we have brought on a couple extra people, and that's all they do is disinfect behind everybody. So we can I know I've been to resorts that put a resort fee on or whatever. They put some kind of extenuating circumstance
Like compliance.
fee. Yeah, and when fuel costs were a big consideration, you'd see a full fuel surcharge on invoices. So that might be something we can consider, which I hadn't really factored in before in our invoices, is COVID-related surcharge.
I think it's a big issue for daycares. You know, they're having to, they can take care of their kids, they have to have more staff, they have to clean constantly. So it's an increased expense to operate under. So
reflected in your invoices, you know, business people out there. But and then you, when as a customer, should actually ask for that. I would say in your invoicing from your vendor, because I never even thought about it before. But we're definitely cranking up our expenses for this event.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay.
Cost of masks. Wear your mask, wash your hands.
That's absolutely part of it, right? With the whole requirements that every business has now for PPE, that, and you know, that burden, but it's also part of the safety requirements that are being required. That is most definitely an eligible expense.
Well, as someone who was ordered by the government to shut down, I think they're all COVID expenses, quite frankly. We shut down a little earlier than we were told to, because we take seriously the comfort and safety of our employees and our customers. So we shut down a little bit earlier than told. But nonetheless, when you're ordered by government to close, I think everything you do is COVID related. Mm-hmm. As Greg mentioned, you know, we're down $800,000, which we usually have this time of year to make it through the year, because it's our season. Anyway, it's hard to fill the boxes in, and it's hard to dot those I's and cross the T's, but we're doing what we can. Honestly, I did have a question. Who did the artwork behind you?
Oh, that is actually a picture that I took down in Ketchikan.
Oh, okay. And then you had it panelized.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm sitting in my studio as we speak.
Well, it's funny because, you know, as we've gotten used to their town halls, it's everyone, you know, this focus on the background and what's behind you and other things. So it got dual purposed into it.
Great. It's lovely. Good idea to do that.
Thank you.
Well, I wanted to ask too, if businesses, if folks, and you don't have to, you know, if you think about it later and you get back to me later, if anybody's interested in signing up for individual business assistance, you know, I think that I'm going to be working with the chambers in Whittier, Valdez, and Cordova to support them in providing that. If you know of people, you know, I've heard a lot about how the process is, a lot of it is electronically based, and not everybody is completely comfortable with computer technology and doing stuff online. So that could be an issue for some folks. And also, if you have ideas or requests for future workshops or guidance as we go forward on how to, you know, businesses can get relief. And also, if you think of other speakers you'd like to hear from, I'm wondering, I'd love to hear from people about that too. Or if you would like to have regular check-ins, you know, maybe you want to meet once a quarter or something like that to ask questions or see how things are going. So ideas, if anybody's got ideas, by all means, let me know, or Kathy and or Kelly or Sharon Anderson in Valdez, and we'll be working together to support the business community. And I didn't mean to cut anybody off. If anybody still had questions for Jon or Alan, that's of course still an option.
I got to go, but thank you, Jon. Thank you, Alan. Thanks for putting this on, Kristen. Bye.
Thanks, Greg. All right. Well, our numbers are dwindling.
Again, Kristen, thank you for putting this on, and Jon and Alan, we appreciate it.
Yep.
You know, I can't predict the future anymore. I used to be kind of okay with some of this, but I don't know what tomorrow brings. So let's play it by ear as far as, and when you say quarterly, you go, oh my God, that's so far out there. Where quarterly used to seem kind of normal, you know? Yeah. Now it's like, what could happen in a quarter of a year? Sure. Yeah.
What is normal? Yeah. There is no normal.
No, there is no normal.
Yeah.
Hey, Kristen?
Yes.
Did you, there's several links in the chat. And
I will save the chat, yes.
Because I'm on mobile, so I can't easily copy paste them.
Yeah, I think there's a function to save the whole chat thing, and I am recording, so I'll have that link too.
Okay, thanks. And then there was some requests from people who were out on the fishing grounds to watch this later, and they asked if you could post the link to this recorded session in that Facebook event discussion.
Okay.
Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah, that's my interest to see how this pans out for commercial fishermen as well.
Yeah. Okay. Great. All right. Well,
thanks, Kristen.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Thanks for sharing all your experiences, and thanks to Alan and Jon for your time. That was super helpful.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate your perspective.
Thank you, everyone.
Good sheesh. Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Take care.